Hi, I'm Talal Al-Asmani and welcome to another segment of Mawaheb Chat. Today we're here with Shahenaz and she's an editor. She's worked with Imagination on films like Zinzana, The Worthy, and now On Board Time with Yasser Yasser. And it's a pleasure to have you here. You're our first editor.
Oh, thanks. So it's a pleasure to be here.
There's so many things people can learn about editors. Today editing has become somewhat, accessible to the general public who might not be interested in getting into film with simple apps and, things that can help you put things together. But being an editor where you get to edit movies, what program do you use?
Well, I do use Avid. I started off working with different softwares, but I knew that if I wanted to become a feature film editor, I would have to get into Avid because it's the industry standard. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I got my Avid certification in 2014, making me the first Avid certified editor in Jordan. So that opened up a whole lot of opportunities for me, knowing that there aren't many editors in the business. And this is an emerging industry with a lot of films that are happening. So it definitely gave me a way in.
How do you get your way in as an editor and becoming certified?
I think with editing, there are so many different factors involved. One is knowing the software itself, but the other thing is knowing how to tell a story. A lot of people can learn how to use a software. It's just a matter of clicks here and there, or technology is everywhere nowadays, so everyone is tech savvy in a way. But there are very few people that know how to tell a story. So as an editor, you have to be the director's right hand. You need to be able to hear the director's vision and help him tell that story in your own way. So it's important to learn both. I think for me, I learned screenwriting first, which kind of gave me the backbone of storytelling. And then I got into editing after that.
So you mentioned working with the director, and you spend a lot of time with the director.
Yeah, you do. It's like a married couple.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have your time at first. So I want to hear the process of how it starts when you're on a new project, and the production starts. You actually start pretty soon after that, don't you?
Well, it depends. There are certain films which I had joined after. Mm-hmm. But on the Worthiest case, for example, I was on board from pre-production. I had spoken to the post team in Romania. We were on board everything. We knew exactly how we're going to ingest the material, how we're going to edit it, what the files I needed are, what they needed from me, and so on. So I literally started editing from day one. We received the material, everything was synced by the assistant editor. And then they would send me the bins, I would take them in and I edit anything that comes in. So I think it was like a week or two after they had wrapped shoot, we had the first cut of the film ready.
Wow. So at first you have like fragments of the film, sort of, right?
Yeah, you do. Especially if they're shooting scenes out of sequence. Yeah. So I would just have to put them separately on different timelines. Then once I had all of my elements, I'll put them together and we have this first film made.
So after you mentioned you put an assembly together by the time that the film wraps, is that when the director comes in?
That's when the director comes in. We usually have a first pass, which would usually take about 5 to 8 weeks of the director giving me specific notes about what he wants and what he had envisioned for each scene. Because the way I would receive material, I never go to set and I never talk to the directors about what they want before I actually start working with the material. So I judge by how it was shot, what the material is, and how I can use all of that in telling the story in the best way possible. So in some ways it might give directors ideas, and in other cases the director might come back and say, this is not how I wanted it, this is exactly how I wanted it to be. And it's kind of like piecing together a puzzle, and you just start putting all of those shots within a scene together and you have it complete. Once the director is happy with the first cut, that's when we screen it to producers, executives, and anyone who's willing to give critique, I guess.
So after producers see your film and see the cut, is that when you would tend to take a break?
There are very few breaks between different stages of the editing because it's a very long and tedious process, and we need to get everything done in a short period of time before the next project comes along. It also depends on how big the project is. With Zinzana, it was a much smoother, much faster process than it was on The Worthy, because The Worthy was a much more VFX heavy film.
Do you take any part in the VFX?
I don't do any of the final VFX work on the film, but for screening purposes, for internal screening purposes, I would usually have like a temporary VFX edit in there, which I can like quickly do on Avid or whatever software I'm using. But yeah, no, I would never do, like there are people for that. There are experts that do all of that. And after the VFX work, it obviously comes in all of the music, sound, and all of that, and that's where my job stops. And
how long does it take from when you first start, when the production starts, until your job stops? On average, it will usually take 4 to 6 weeks to get the first assembly cut done, which is the assembly by the editor, by me. I would show it to the director, and then after that I would sit with the director for another 5 to 8 weeks to get a director's cut out, and that's when we would show it to the producers. Wow. And then you've had project after project after project recently, and it's a very successful part of your life, and I think it's an amazing achievement. With all these hours, is it easy for you to be able to like push through? And I know it's not easy for any filmmaker, but how are you handling all that? Well, obviously I think it's a difficult process for anyone to work long hours and to work continuously, but it's very rewarding to know that we are part of a growing industry, and we're part of this big film movement that's happening in the Arab world. And it's nice to be a person that has worked alongside Majid Al-Ansari or Yasser Al-Yasseri, and to say, we made these films together, and they're new genres and they're groundbreaking for our culture and for our time, and it's motivating. It's nice to be a part of it. So you push through for that. I mean that you're making everybody else proud. We mentioned Majid Al-Ansari, Yasser Al-Yasseri, and Ali Mustafa, all 3 different directors that you've spent those days in the edit suite working with different directors. Does that change sort of the way you work? Is there different ways you've had to adjust your process? Yeah, it's always different. Editing with a director is like a married couple's relationship. You need to learn how to talk to that other person and communicate, and editing can be very frustrating sometimes. If the editor suggests something that the director doesn't necessarily agree with, it's usually a fight in the edit room. Yeah, of course. So it's about knowing how to deal with each other and how to talk to each other and come to an agreement on what's the best decision for this scene, or what's the best decision for this film in specific. And it differs with each director. Each director has their own working hours, or their different personalities, or their different characteristics. So it's a learning process. It's learning how to socialize and communicate. So yeah, there's a social aspect to it. You've talked about the technical aspect, the story aspect. What do you look at other editors out there? Is there a specific editor that you've sort of learned a lot from, and what makes a good editor in your opinion? A good editor is a storyteller. And a good editor is someone that knows how to listen to the director and gets the director's vision right. It sometimes means that you need to tell the director that they're not completely on point, but it's knowing how to tell that story in the best way possible in collaboration with the director. I would say, unfortunately, for the Middle East, there aren't many editors. So when I started working, I found myself in the deep end here. It's not like I got to sit with other editors who could mentor me or to teach me through this. But there are definitely so many editors internationally, and well-known editors, from Thelma Schoonmaker to others, that I would constantly be watching, like their talks or their interviews, or trying to hear their like online tutorials or any of that, just to get as much insight into editing as possible. Especially if we're trying to build an industry that's so international. It's not just regional, it's international, and we're trying to break into, all the world. And what have any of them have said in these videos that you've seen or interviews? that helped you that you could now maybe say and return the favor to other editors who are listening?
Know your software. Know all of the tools that are available to you. Know how to talk to your director and know how to tell a story. That's my advice.
Wow.
And besides that, everything comes easy.
So if someone wants to start and get involved and as an editor by trade, going straight to Avid might be very complicated for a beginner. What would you suggest for them to start with?
I'm a big fan of Adobe Premiere, to be honest. It has good organizational tools in there, and it's very simple to use. I know that they've edited Gone Girl completely on Adobe Premiere, so I guess that's an example of saying, you know, it is possible to get a film out of Premiere, because there are people that argue against it, and they would say, oh, it works for shorter videos, but not longer ones. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what software you're using, as long as you know what the tools are and what you can achieve in each software. So just pick whichever one that's most comfortable to you, and that gets the work done. It doesn't really matter how much you know, you paid for it or what the monthly subscription fee is.
It's how you use it.
It's how you use it.
And probably the content of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's next for you now? What is it do you know have you anything lined up? Do you want to do something different or keep doing the same?
I think for the time being, I'm happy working on films from the Arab world. This is something that I'm very proud to be a part of, and I just want to see how far we can go with it.
I feel lucky to have this opportunity to sit down and talk to you and learn from you, and thank you very much for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Until next time.